Hello, my friends. I am excited to share with you the results of a very extensive and thorough analysis of data to determine a fundamental idea in astrology, which is, are fire and air signs extroverted? These signs are sometimes called the masculine signs. The fire signs, of course, are Aries, Leo, Sagittarius. The air signs are Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. They're sometimes called masculine as being very expressive, and the earth and water signs more receptive, and therefore more introverted. This is a very fundamental idea in astrology, used for probably thousands of years, very commonly used today. Is it true? Some research has been done on this. In fact, I was involved in a study on this in the year 2010. It's now 14 years later, the year 2024, and revisiting this question and going into great detail using data visualization to really see what's going on. So I want to share the results of this research. It took a lot of time to conduct this, and it really helps us answer this question. So here's what the research is about. Some number of years ago, roughly 20 to 25 years ago, a professor of psychology, Dr. David Fink, gave to his students a psychological test. It's known as the Eysenck Personality Test. He gave it to 940 of his students. He doesn't have 940 students in one class. He gave it to his students over many years. So he gave them this test. They took the test, and he also got their birth data, which was from a birth certificate or birth record. This is fantastic information. We have their extroversion-introversion scores from a psychological test that has been used very widely by psychologists. It has excellent reliability. It's a very good test. And we have their birth data, and we can look at their birth data, look at their scores, and see if these rules for astrology work. And as I mentioned, I've done a very extensive study. It's fun to look at the results and look at all the data and the way it's graphed out so you can see what's really happening here. Now, the reason why Professor Fink collected this data is because of the Gauquelin research, one of the most famous studies ever in astrology, one of the most compelling and convincing research studies, according to many people. I have replicated the Gauquelin studies. I've made 2 YouTube videos about it. You can watch those about the Gauquelin research and replicating it. My study and replication of the Gauquelin research shows that it's not, unfortunately. I was really disappointed when I did that research to find out that the Gauquelin results were not as impressive as I thought they were from reading the articles and books. But anyway, the Gauquelin research is one of the most famous studies in astrology, and there are these things called Gauquelin zones. If planets are just above rising, they're more powerful, according to the Gauquelin research, and also just after culminating, like where the sun would be just after midday, as it just passes its highest point in the sky. We call that the culmination. So those 2 areas of the sky are sensitive zones where the planets have more power. And so, for example, athletes, what planet do they have? The greatest athletes of all time. What planet would they have in those zones? Can you guess? Yes, Mars. So Professor Fink's hypothesis makes a lot of sense, which is that if Saturn is in one of those zones, the person would be more introverted. If Jupiter is in one of those sensitive zones, they call plus zones, so Jupiter would make the person more extroverted. This is what he wanted to see. He asked me to help with the data analysis. We did the analysis, and the Gauquelin sectors worked mildly. There was mild support, which is impressive, that there was some support, not overwhelming support. It wasn't like, when you look at the probability value, it wasn't like 0.00001 or something. But it was fairly good support for the theory, not overwhelmingly good support. Now, I am involved in an area of astrology called vibrational astrology, so naturally I wanted to test vibrational astrology, and I built some models based around principles in vibrational astrology, and I got fairly good support for that, such as Sun and Saturn in what we call 7 vibration or 7th harmonic did correlate with introversion. And I did that study while I was doing a master's degree program at the University of Florida, and my research was supervised by sociology professor Monica Ardelt. So it was a very well done, academically sound research study. But I wanted to take it further, and that's what I've done, to analyze this in greater detail and especially test this idea of the zodiac signs. So, if you want, by the way, if you want to go back and read those studies that I did in 2010, I've uploaded them to astrologydc.com. Let me show that to you. If you go to astrologydc.com, the DC is my name, David Cochrane, that's the name for that website. Then you click on the first button. You see there's not a whole lot on my little website, but there's a button here, links to YouTube videos. If you click on that, you get this huge index into over 500 of the 700 tutorial videos that I've made. And if you scroll to the bottom, all these different categories, and you scroll down to research-controlled studies. Under research-controlled studies, I added these 2 new things, the introversion-extraversion research. And most of these are videos, but these 2 are not videos, they're articles. And if you click on it, there's the paper. This is also very thoroughly conducted research, and it gives all of the details about it and graphs of the results. And at the end are I mentioned the supervisors at the University of Florida who helped in making sure that this was properly conducted research. Okay, so now back to our PowerPoint. So, in this research, we're going to analyze this idea of the zodiac signs in much, much greater detail to see if there's any support for the idea that fire signs are, masculine signs are extroverted, feminine signs are introverted. Though, by the way, those are terms that have been handed down for thousands of years. This whole terminology of masculine and feminine is a little outdated, but anyway, that's the terminology used. Now, let's talk about the Eysenck Personality Test, so we know what it is, because this was given to the 940 students. It measures 2 things: an extroversion-introversion scale, from how introverted, quiet, inner-oriented you are, to how expressive, how much sociability you need. So it's a scale, and on this test, it goes from 0 to 24, and 12 is average. So if you score 12 on the test, you're right in the middle. If you're closer to 0, you're extremely introverted. If you're closer to 24, you're more extroverted. And there are two of these things. There's the 2 scales, the introversion-extraversion, and another one that's neuroticism versus stability. That's essentially how well do you handle pressure, stress, things like that. Do you get flustered easily? Are you able to, stay stable? And you can read about these things and get a more detailed idea. But just fundamentally, that's what it's about. Again, 12 is a middle score. Now, sometimes people take these tests and they're just making themselves look good, like it's very exaggerated. And there is a lie score. Shows whether there's some indication that you might be just answering to make yourself look good and giving exaggerated answers. And that goes from 0 to 9. And if you score 5 or higher, it's generally recommended to just not use that data. And in the research that was done, there were a few lie scores. I can't remember, 4, 5, 6 of them that were removed. We ended up with 940 in the analysis. Fortunately, it was just a few. It wouldn't make any big difference in the final results. Now, in preparing for this presentation after I did the research, I Googled the Eysenck test. I wanted to go over it, refresh my mind about it, get some new information. And I found the test online. I was really surprised because when I did this research back in 2010, you had to purchase the test. It's not inexpensive. So there's an investment of money to, we wanted to replicate the study and do it again. Professor Fink was the chair of the psychology department of a small college, and so he has access to getting things like this. But for those of us on our own and having to pay out of our own pocket, that was a consideration. Well, now, whoa, this test is online. I'll show you one of the websites where I found it. Here, no, this one here, psychology-test.net, and it's in a folder called test and then Eysenck-EPI. You can see it up there, and you could type that in and go to the website, and it tells you about the test, and there it is. It's there, and you can just take it. And it's 57 questions, if I remember correctly. Yeah, 57 questions. And then you can put in your name, your email address, your gender, your age. That's not used for the score, but I guess probably they're collecting data. And then you click on Get Test Results, and you get the test results. In fact, I took it for fun. And to get a better intuitive feeling for what it is I'm researching, I took the test. And here's the website. It's beautiful. It just came up and showed me my results. So here's a bar chart that goes from 0 to 24. And I scored 9 on introversion, less than the 12, that's average. So you might say modestly introverted, introverted but not extreme. Neuroticism and stability, extremely stable with a score of 4. And very not neurotic. And my I score was 3, which is below the 5. And so you can take the test. It's fun. And I've got here on the slide, let's see, back to PowerPoint. Here I mentioned that I took the test and that I got a score of 9 on introversion-extraversion. Means I'm mildly introverted. That makes sense because I think of myself as introverted. I spend most of my time alone, reading, studying, doing research. But I get out and when I'm with people, I'm highly social. I meet and greet, and I'm, you can see fairly expressive in my lectures and whatever. So I'm primarily introverted, but when I get out there, I really get out there. So that made sense to me. Neuroticism stability, I'm scoring highly stable, and I do handle pressure and stress extremely well. I'm sharing my personal story just to give you a feeling that you can take the test, and probably you'll see that it makes sense. Now, I think I am mentally and emotionally very sensitive and thrown off by certain things, not so stable. But in terms of handling pressure and stress, it is true. So if we think of it that way, I would say that that's very accurate. If you were just characterizing me like mentally and emotionally, am I always like not sent into some imaginary world or something that, I don't feel completely stable in that regards. But in terms of what I think they're referring to, it makes sense. The I scale was 3, so that's below the cutoff point of 5. And that made sense too, because I think some of my answers might have sounded slightly extreme, and but I was honest. So anyway, not only does it make sense to me, but in terms of my astrology chart, it makes sense. I have a Taurus stellium. How's that for stability? So, anecdotally, when we do things with astrology and we work with it, it does seem to work. And for me personally, it worked. It's interesting if you take the test and you relate it to your astrology. If you have a lot of Sagittarius in the 9th house, be extroverted, do you score high in extroversion? I mean, these things seem to work. Astrology seems to work in our personal experience. It does for me, does for most people in astrology. But what happens when we test it carefully? 940 people, they're they're not astrologers, they're just taking the test. What happens? To me, it's very exciting to see what the results will be. Now, one of the reasons I wanted to go back to this research is because other people have done some research on extroversion, introversion. For example, Robert Curry did some research on introversion, extroversion, and he found some support for the idea. Now, what Robert did, is, if I understand it correctly, is he went and he looked at the individual questions. I just showed you, the 57 questions, and he looked at them to see if they sounded like fire in astrology or water. So he went into like a lot of more detail, not just taking the final scores, and he was able to find pretty good support for the idea that the astrology relates to introversion, extroversion, and also the other scale, neuroticism versus stability. Now, unfortunately, the data that Robert's using, it was from collected by Jeffrey Dean. He's a big cynic of astrology. He tries to disprove astrology, and he collected some data. He shared it with Robert. He told Robert not to make it public, so I would have to email Jeffrey Dean and see if he would allow me to have access to the data or anyone else. Frankly, I don't think is good style for research in the modern age. We should make our data available. By the way, if you want those 940 cases of introversion, extroversion data that I'm using, I got that from the Sirius astrology software, the company Cosmic Patterns, and the website is astrosoftware.com. It's part of a commercial package. Maybe they would make it available to the general public or not, but right now it's in that commercial software. Okay. And I was one of the developers of the software, and I have the software, obviously, and I have that data. Okay. So here's what I did. I did two things. One, compare the elements. Are fire signs more extroverted than water signs, for example? But also, let's look at each fire sign. There are 3 fire signs, Aries, Leo, Sagittarius. So I analyzed them individually and collectively, you might say, the grouped as fire, earth, air, water. So I did it both ways. Let's look at all 12 signs, because maybe Sagittarius is extroverted, but Aries is not. We often think of Sagittarius as highly extroverted. So yeah, fire signs perhaps, but then especially some signs. And so on the next slides, I'm going to show you the results. In future videos, I'm going to show you how I did the research. For those of you who want to conduct the research, I'll show you the software. I'm going to show all the steps. But here, I'm just going to tell you the results of the research. And here they are. Big screen of numbers, but actually all we're interested in here, in this, is the bold value over here. And what this is saying is that for the sun sign, this is just a bunch of statistical information. We don't really care about that for now. Is this PR, and then in parentheses, greater than F? This is the probability. If the probability is below 0.05, then we get interested. We go, wow, maybe sun signs relate to introversion, extroversion. So this is taking the introversion, extroversion score. For example, I scored 9. And then we look at my sun sign, it's Earth. Earth is feminine. I should be introverted. We can look at my rising sign, which is Aries. Well, that would say I'm extroverted. And my moon sign is Gemini, which is extroverted. But my Mercury and Venus and Mars signs are also Taurus. Overall, I'm getting a lot of correlation with introversion, and overall, I'm a little more, my astrology works well. Does it work for other people? What it's saying is no, it doesn't. The sun sign is nowhere near 0.05. It's 0.849. That's about as bad as you can get. I mean, that's like flipping a coin. I mean, it's just like, it's showing that the extroverts do not have their sun in fire signs. Here, in any particular sign. No signs are standing out. This is not, now on the next slides, I'm going to show you a breakdown of each sign. What we're doing first, right here, is just an overall thing. Are some signs more extroverted than others? Answer, no. Are some moon signs more extroverted than others? No. Mercury, no. Venus, no. Mars, no. They all are nowhere near 0.05. On the next slides, I'm going to show you a breakdown of each sign comparison. Aries compared to Taurus, Aries to Gemini, Aries to Cancer, or we just break them all down. But first we do an overall. The answer is, so far, the answer is no. Fire and air signs are not more extroverted. But we're going to dig deeper and deeper. Now here's a curious thing. Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto signs are related to extroversion. Whoa! How crazy is that? The research is showing that the zodiac sign of Saturn, zodiac sign of Uranus, the zodiac sign of Neptune, the zodiac sign of Pluto do relate to extroversion versus introversion. Some signs are more extroverted. On the next slide, we're going to see what those signs are, and we're going to come up with an explanation for why they're more extroverted. But the North Node, this is the Moon's node. I put TNO, means the Moon's true North Node, has not related to introversion-extroversion. The Ascendant, in other words, the rising sign, the midheaven sign. I did the vertex sign, none of them. So this is the first time to look into this data in that much detail. So on the bottom of this slide, I have overall results. This is the overall results using something called ANOVA. It's a way of analyzing this information. Only Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto signs are related to extroversion, introversion. Weird. Why is that? Well, before I answer that question, here I'm also emphasizing we're going to compare the elements. Combine Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius together to be fire, and so on. Combine the earth signs, air signs, and water signs together, and compare the elements. And here's the elements. If we combine Aries, Leo, and Sag together, does it reach our cutoff point of somewhere around 0.05, even below 0.1, something showing a tendency for the sun elements, fire, earth, air, water? No. Moon? No. Mercury? No. Venus? No. Mars? No. Sometimes the value will be a little closer, like Mercury's 0.108. There's random fluctuation. Sometimes things by chance will start to look a little bit good. There's just chance fluctuations. Research is a slow and gradual process. You have to do a study and then replicate it to be sure. So the fact you see a 0.108, you might start getting excited and think, oh, maybe Mercury. Well, maybe, but more likely it's just another random fluctuation. And for the elements, we find Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto elements do predict, they correlate, they're associated with your extroversion or introversion score. So we're getting a similar results whether we do the signs individually, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, or whether we group them together in elements. We're getting similar results that Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto signs do correlate with extroversion and introversion, and hugely. I mean, they're very strongly associated. I mean, this is like, it's like black and white. It's very strikingly crystal clear. The signs of the planets have no relationship to extroversion and introversion, except Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, and they are extremely strongly correlated. Wow, how weird is that? And Saturn correlates fairly well. The signs do. When we combine them with elements, it's not, it's not impressive. But there's some indication. Saturn, definitely Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. Wow, it's crazy. So this is why we do research. It's intriguing to see what's going on. So Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto signs are associated with extroversion, introversion. This means that when these planets, say Neptune is in a particular sign, people are more extroverted. When Neptune's in another sign, they're more introverted. And it's such an incredibly powerful correlation. It's almost certainly not a random fluctuation. Why? Why would these things have anything to do with it? Well, it's because older people are more introverted than younger people. This finding has been replicated numerous times in the research. For example, I have a reference here of a paper called Age Differences in Adult Personality, Findings from the United States and China, in the Journal of Gerontology, blah, blah, blah. And in this study, peer-reviewed academic article, they used personality tests. I think this one used the Eysenck Personality Test, if I remember correctly. And they found out that when you're older, you score much higher on these personality tests. I mean, much lower, I should say. You're more introverted the older you are, which kind of makes sense. Well, whether it makes sense or not, that's what happens. Older people have less need to be out and about and socializing, and they're more introverted. Repeated over and over again. So what's happening? Saturn is in a sign for 2.5 years. So you can see what's happening. The older students have Saturn in a different sign. Uranus is in a sign for about 7 years. It's generational. So what you have here is that the sign of the zodiac sign of the outer planets is correlated with how old you are, and it's the age that's doing it. And one thing that's very good about this, and very cool, very nice, is that our study again confirms older people are more introverted. And every time you do the study, it's with a different group of people. This is a very small college in Vermont. Most of the people live in Vermont, in that area, most of the students. So for this group of people, that demographic of people in undergraduate psychology courses at a small college, it's good to replicate studies in different cultures, in different settings, different demographic groups, different ages. So for this particular group, again, older people score differently. Now, we haven't shown yet whether they're scoring, maybe the older people are more extroverted. I'm going to show you on the next slide. No, the older people are more introverted. This also helps us appreciate the reliability of this test, that it seems to work over and over again, used in different contexts. You're getting the same kinds of results. Older people are more introverted. So it has nothing to do with the astrology. It has to do with the fact that those signs correlate with your age, and it makes sense of why no other signs are working. Okay, now, we're going to dive in deep into the specific relationship of each sign, like Aries compared to Taurus, Aries compared to Gemini, and we're going to discover and we're going to find some new things as we dig in deeper. Before we do, I just want to show you this one slide that confirms the distribution of the data. It looks almost like a normal curve. It's skewed slightly to the right. On the horizontal axis here, the x-axis, these are the scores from 0 to 24. You see the scores varied from about 2 or 3 up to about 22, it looks like. 2 to 22, almost the entire range of 0 to 24. And so it's not a perfect normal distribution, but there's nothing strange about it. And I've made some other tutorial videos where I explain that the data does not need to have a perfect normal distribution. It's not a problem. I have other videos, I'll try to remember to put links to those other videos in the description for this video in case you want to read them. So the data, it looks good. That's actually something that's a first step in research, is look at your data. I wanted to jump right into the results. But before we go any further, I thought I would just show you, some of the ways we look at the data, make sure it looks reasonable and as expected and it's appropriate. It's fine. It's perfect. Used to be like decades ago, people thought, oh, the data is not perfectly normal, there's a problem. As I explained in 2 other tutorial videos, or if you're advanced in your knowledge of statistics and keep up with the latest discoveries, you know that it's actually not a problem for ANOVA. Okay, here on this slide, we start digging in deeper to see if maybe we're overlooking something. We want to really give astrology a chance, every possible way, to see that zodiac signs might work. So we're going to dig deeper and see if what we've looked at so far might have missed something. And I'm at a half hour here, 31 minutes. Let's stop here. I'll continue digging deeper to see if maybe one particular sign is extroverted. Maybe Sagittarius is more extroverted. And in this broad look at things, we're missing that. So I'm going to show you how we dig in deep, how we use these data visualization tools to really research something very thoroughly and comprehensively. Okay, I'll see you in the next video in this series of videos. Thank you very much for watching, my friends. God bless. Namaste.